but you're right. I mean, as we were reminiscing last fall on the ship about how many times we should have failed, we actually found out there were certain times when we should have failed that not all of us even knew about. And so you add those all together, and it really is nothing short of a miracle that we got it done.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of Scuttlebutt, the official podcast of the National Museum of the Surface Navy, in affiliation with the Surface Navy Association's Battleship Iowa chapter, coming to you from the Associated Foundation's Training Center aboard the Battleship. We're joined today by Jeff Lamberti, former chairman of the board for our organization and recent award winner of the inaugural Jeff Lamberti Service Award for the state of Iowa. Welcome, Jeff, and my name is David Camfield. I'm the Vice President, Chief Information Officer, and I'm joined today by...
I'll actually use my name this time, Mike Getcher, Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Engineer, all that kind of stuff.
Marianne Fengler, Communications for the ship and the podcast producer.
Jonathan Williams, President and CEO.
Wow. Kyle Obby, the Development Director, and a warm body in a chair at times, but here to spread the word and to make this an enjoyable podcast with Jeff.
And make sure we're using all the microphones, 100%. And Jeff.
Yeah, it's good to be with you guys. Obviously I run into Jonathan here in Iowa occasionally, and just saw him last week, but haven't seen a lot of you since I think the fall. So since I got off the board, I don't get out there as often. So it's good to see y'all.
Yeah.
Hey, that was your choice, Jeff. I just want to say, we'd still have you on the board if you didn't make that decision.
Yeah.
Well, as I'm getting older, I've been told by my wife, Linda, that I need to try to start reducing some of my obligations, which is difficult to do. But, we were involved for so long, you never are going to lose your love for the Iowa and everything that's going. And as you know, we're always here to help when we can.
Oh, yeah. And to give you top cover, I could absolutely verify that Linda has asked you to trim that back some. So you got top cover for me. Don't worry.
Yeah.
It was fun having you out here for dinner, Jeff. I just was struck, and I've told a number of people from that conversation, and we talked about how many times we should have failed. And it really is, just to get a ship like this is an extraordinary story. I mean, the amount of effort that goes back 20 years for you, and certainly for you since 08, it's a crazy story. It's a story that's almost inhuman in some ways. I mean, for anybody to stick with it that long, it really is amazing.
Yeah, I think we all have to be just a tad bit crazy to start out with the assumption that we knew what we were doing when it came to trying to save a battleship. Fortunately, I think collectively it did work, but you're right. I mean, as we were reminiscing last fall on the ship about how many times we should have failed, we actually found out there were certain times when we should have failed that not all of us even knew about. And so you add those all together, and it really is nothing short of a miracle that we got it done. I mean, we had the stars aligned certain times. I recall when we had the public hearing at the port the first time, and it was just basically, every member of the community spoke in favor of the Iowa being at the Port of LA. And then it came time for the harbor commissioners to talk, and it was just, a dagger to the heart, where it was clear we didn't have a single vote, even from the guy that was from Iowa. Wasn't going to support us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you can just go on and on with those stories. I mean, and obviously, the most challenging thing about it is there's nothing cheap about saving a battleship, right? From the paint, just everything. And so that presents you with all those opportunities to fail. So it's really, Linda, she sat and listened to us talk over dinner on the ship. She's like, somebody should put this in a book, because it's worthy of preserving this story and I said, well, it certainly won't be me, because that's not my talent to be a writer. But sometimes the behind the scenes and the journey of saving the ship parallels, what's happened since it's open till today.
Yeah.
It's epic. It's
You
an
know,
epic story.
In a lot of ways, you look at it, at least from a certain view from space, and it seems like it completely charmed, like all of the things fell in place at just the right time. But we recently spoke with Nora Tyson, whose career appears to be charmed, but when you peel it back a little bit, there's an awful lot of hard work. There's an awful lot of hard work by a lot of people at each one of those junctures. But even having said that, yeah, we should have failed repeatedly.
So
Go ahead.
I was going to say with the story, like where, back to where you got involved and how you got involved and why you got involved. And so we kind of visit that. Maybe we go down that timeline and that road of some of those lessons learned and where we got to today. Because I mean, I've known you, I don't know, 12 years at this point. And so there's a lot behind all of that. And I think our listeners hearing some of that, where you got involved and how that road went, some of the stuff we can share. And then of course we've written into our wills that we can share it after we pass on. The other stuff we're not going to share today in today's podcast, but let's start down that direction, Jeff.
That's right. There's probably some stories better left unsaid for the moment, and
Yes,
we can
absolutely.
go down. So as you know, I spent 12 years in the Iowa legislature. I retired from politics at the end of 2006 and thought I would return to a quiet life of practicing law and getting some of my life back from the busy days of politics. And I did that for about 2 months, and then I was bored out of my mind. And so I was somewhat looking for projects to get involved with. And it would have been probably late 2007, possibly early 2008. Becky Beach, of course, who you all know, she's still on the board. Becky had worked with me in politics, and we were actually looking for things to do together. Received a call from Senator Grassley's office that they had been in communication with a nonprofit group out of Vallejo, or that wanted to put the ship in Vallejo area. And wondered if we'd be willing to meet with them to maybe assist raising some money in the state of Iowa for the preservation of the ship and so forth. Well, we were certainly going to have that meeting. I tell people I don't have a naval background, so it wasn't that led me to have interest in the Iowa. But my office for 12 years was the beautiful Iowa State Capitol. And as you guys all know, there's that beautiful model of the ship. And it wasn't just seeing it every day and walking by it, but it's tradition in Iowa that schools, usually in the elementary grades, come to the Capitol for field trips. And so there's hardly a day that goes by that we don't have multiple bus loads of kids. And my last 3 years, I was president of the Senate. So they often like to either come and sit in my chair or come back to my office. And I'd visit with them and, mention to them and reiterate how beautiful our Capitol is, in which they all agreed. But then I'd ask them what their favorite part was. And for certainly every boy on there, but also a lot of the girls, the ship was a focal point. So we wanted to listen. And, not too long after that, I think maybe June or July of 2008, we made our first trip out. We were actually, with the Navy's assistance, able to get on board. We actually went on board with 2 World War II veterans who had never set foot back on the ship since they left it after World War II, and the emotion. And you don't have to be on that ship very long, and even in the condition it was at the time, and know this is something special. And shortly thereafter, you start to learn the history, and you knew this was a piece of history that was extremely important to be preserved. And so at that point, it got our hearts. And as Jonathan, as you know, we went through the process of working with that group for about a year and a half. And then we just felt like it wasn't going to work. We felt like we had the wrong location, the wrong cost structure, dredging and things that were going to be necessary. And so we reluctantly fired ourselves and stopped. And it was probably one of the hardest things we'd ever done, because by that point we knew this was a piece of history that had to be preserved. And then, make it a long story short, the group in LA formed. I think Becky started having conversations with them at a USS Iowa reunion in Albuquerque. She came home and was very positive that these were the right people. that could get the job done. So we re-engaged at that point, still primarily just to help raise money. How I ended up as chairman, I'm not quite sure how that all worked out. It's kind of a blur, or maybe I just have buried the thought, and that started. Yeah,
more of a mental block, I think.
Yeah,
than
you
a
made
blur,
mental
but,
block.
No,
100%.
there's trauma involved. I know.
100%.
You know, in full defense of Jeff, he was going through a lot of back pain at the time. So
Yeah, I remember. that.
luckily, the back pain masked the mental pain that may have been tied to all of that.
That was
yeah, because if you remember, when after we did all the hard work and we finally got ready, we're getting ready for the what we call the grand tow when we
The first tow out of Sassoon Bay.
no, from the outer harbor at LA
Oh.
into its permanent
Was that
home.
The first arrival,
that was
the
a-
first commissioning or the arrival. I don't know
fourth
what
commission,
June 9th,
something.
We had some
2012.
story
Oh
for
my
it, something.
God.
We called it something, the Grand Prix or something.
Well, so we were on board on that, but that's right. When we actually opened, when we had the ceremony, Becky had been out how long? I mean, a month?
Weeks, yeah,
Yeah.
weeks.
Because, putting on events and that kind of stuff is really her specialty. I flew out, I don't know, several days before our opening. And of course, at the time, I didn't know what was wrong with me. Ultimately, I found out I had an infection in my spine and had to have surgery at Mayo Clinic. But at the time, all I knew, I was in terrible pain.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get ready, right? I mean, we're taking cars and running to Home Depot or to Costco to get, all kinds of things. And I finally told Becky, I said, man, I just can't do it. I'm going to have to rest. And she just snapped at me like I was a hindrance at that point. So just go back to the hotel and get out of my way. And unfortunately, it was so bad I could not attend the actual opening. So that's it's about the only key event I think that I missed.
Yeah.
Because as you recall, Jonathan, you and I and Becky and Robert were there when they call it restepping the mast. So we got involved in lots of different things, but I missed the opening. And it was shortly thereafter when I got home that I found out what I had and ended up with surgery. But Becky was all business at that time. She had no sympathy for me. She felt pretty bad later, I have to admit.
That was a low pressure day,
Yeah, low pressure
There was
day.
nothing going on. So
Well, and as you recalled, that's the Governor Bradstad then had the choking incident
Right.
Oh yeah.
with a carrot, I
We
believe.
see him.
every time we see him, we learn
Yeah.
about that chicken.
Yeah, he
chicken
reminds
wing or
us of the
chicken
choking
bone.
incident.
I remember
But-
the drama. Go ahead, Jeff.
Nevertheless, it went off. We opened, and the rest is history.
Jeff, I remember the one story, that the drama associated with coming out for that first tow. We were trying to get her out of Sassoon Bay. And I think you were actually at an airport somewhere and literally not knowing if all the money had come together.
So you wanted to. I thought about that story too.
Yeah, it just it was amazing. I mean, you literally didn't know for sure. You're headed out here, but we weren't even confident yet that we could put it all together.
No, so we were scheduled obviously for the tow. So after a lot of the work had been done at the Port of Richmond, and it was finally going to be time to get this, that's what it was.
No,
wasn't
it was the
That's
one
what-
to Richmond. It was
Yeah.
when we didn't have enough. Okay, so I'm gonna bring some stuff out on podcasts that hasn't fully made its way out. We did not have enough funding to fund the deposit on the tow. To get it towed out of Sassoon Bay to Richmond, and you and Becky were on an airplane. When you got on the plane, we didn't have any money. I think that's where we were.
Well,
at.
here, more of the story, and that's what I thought it was. So Becky and I had left Des Moines. We connected in Denver, and we're on the plane in Denver in a bad snowstorm. So add that on top of everything. Becky's on the phone, and I don't remember, Jonathan, if it was you or Robert. And we were short, I don't remember, but it was north of $100,000. I do recall that. And literally the flight attendants are getting on Becky like, you have got to hang up the phone. I mean, we were taxiing. You've got to hang up your phone now. They weren't near as patient as they are today. And so Becky hangs up. She tells me all of this. A few minutes later, we're in the air, and we didn't, for the flight from Denver to San Francisco, we had no idea if we were going to have a ship to move or what happened. And by the time we landed, through people borrowing from their 401ks or other retirements or making loans or, doing whatever, when we landed and got out to the ship, there was enough money to pay to get it towed. So
Yeah.
a great example of one of those where we should have failed.
Yeah, that's why I bring it up.
Within 30 minutes. I mean, I think we got the money together within 30 minutes, and it was just a patchwork quilt. I mean, it really was a patchwork quilt of people that just tossed funds.
And it still amazes me too. And I don't even know if you know this stuff, Kyle, but people who literally work here aboard the ship now or still donate their time. Dave Way, Kurt Vandermeulen, and photographer
Greg Bishop.
none of the other.
Rick, Steve.
No, my gosh, I can't. Paul.
Jeremy Bonnell.
Jeremy Bonnell, and then was it the Rydells or something from there's a couple of other companies that contributed to it.
There was
pretty
a
amazing.
Cody.
And it really was that patchwork is the right term.
Yeah.
Literally people cared enough about this to loan or give or do whatever it is just to be able to get this ship, as I call it, out of hock.
Yeah. And we pulled it off. So here we are. We got it open here in LA, and we were successful in hooking you to be chairman of the board, against your will probably, but you had no idea. Luckily, we had the back incident in the middle of that we were able to convince you to do something that you probably didn't know you were getting convinced to do. So I guess you look at the next the next several years, where we were over even the past 12 years, and kind of go through it with that and what this really means to, I think, the legacy of the ship, the legacy of the state of Iowa, and growing even the legacy of the nation, and how we go something bigger. And I think coming from your position, a lifetime Iowan, a native Iowan, why this matters to folks in your state, why this is important.
Well, and I tell people like I say, after you get involved, we get the ship and the rest is history, but it wasn't quite that easy. When we started, when we opened, everything was a challenge. For a while, our board was very small and we were all doing a lot. And we knew right away we needed to get some good board members to help us with this journey. And we did. And as you know, a lot of them are still around, and that's been very key. But things weren't always peachy when we were doing. I mean, we were struggling to learn what worked and what didn't, how to get people out there. I don't know how many times a year that we were out there, but sometimes 6 or 8, and because everything was a challenge. And just because we opened our doors, we weren't sure we were going to survive, and if we did, for how long. And so it was constant work, and we all just learned and got better and better as we went, and you guys continue to do that. And that's what makes it so rewarding. We weren't a bunch of museum experts when we started, but certainly people have figured that out and just done a great job. As you went through this whole process, as I said, it didn't take long to figure out what an important piece of history we had, right? And that it deserved and needed to be preserved and saved. And for a lot of different reasons, it's our history. It's the history of the state of Iowa. It's so important as a teaching tool for younger generations. And it's been very heartening to see how much the young people enjoy. That was one of our initial things. Is some 8-year-old kid really going to like to come to Battleship? And of course, the answers are resounding yes, that they love it. And so it's just, this has been the most rewarding project I think I've ever worked on. I got to do some really important things in the legislature, but as I tell people, who gets to be part of saving a battleship? I mean, those opportunities don't come along every day, and you can't believe how much I hear about it here. And Jonathan knows, in my office, we still have a stack of hats that we bought years and years ago that people can make a little donation here at my law office. And they do, and now I obviously have the wonderful model that you all bestowed on me at the state capitol, and that's a great talking point. And so I never stop talking about the Iowa. As you know, I send lots of people out there because I encourage every Iowan that even has an interest. I say you need to get out there and see it, and I have many of my clients who have been out there. So it's just an important piece, and we're thrilled to be now part of something bigger than just the Iowa with the Museum of the Surface Navy. Because from an Iowan's perspective, then I really see that, we don't ever have to worry about whether the Iowa is going to be around, right? We're going to become, even though you've done a great job and it's well positioned to do that on its own, it's going to become part of something even bigger. And so it's just going to make sure that it's preserved for forever.
Once again, we had a conversation that was so good it went on quite a bit longer, and we will save the second half of it for another podcast. As usual, thank you for hanging out with us on Scuttlebutt. If you have any comments, questions, feedback, topics you'd like us to discuss, please shoot us an email at podcast@labattleship.com, podcast@labattleship.com, or drop something in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we will catch you on the next episode of Scuttlebutt.